Welcome everybody to the webinar. Thanks for being here. My name is Scott Rennick. I'm the owner and the publisher of the Climbing Business Journal. As you guys know, we work to empower and inspire the people that work in the climbing gyms, especially route setters. Our roots go back to route setting. I was a commercial and comp route setter 25 years ago, and it's a space that really means a lot to us. And I know it's like, to me, I think you all the people that really not only create the product that everybody climbs on, but I think you define the culture in a lot of ways as well. So it's a pleasure to do these. And I'd love to introduce Vortex Routesetting. You guys know them. I love them. Foxman, McCarthy, James, Justin Wright. They're one of the things that I really appreciate at CBJ and being a 30-year veteran of the sport is that they really contribute to the data that's been collected. This whole thing started a couple of years ago when they presented some of the data that they had been collecting about route setter compensation and workplace situations at the CWA Summit like 3 years ago, and they just did that again just last month. So we're really fortunate to be working with them. It's a privilege. I have a lot of respect for what they're doing for the trade of route setting, and I will turn. And both of them are highly experienced route setters, have run crews with multiple locations under them, and so they're really great people to be leading the series. So I'll hand it out to you now. Thank you.
Oh, thanks, Scott.
Thanks, Scott. We also should introduce, although I'm not sure how much of an introduction he'll actually require. I feel like most people know who this is, but Chris Danielson is also in the room. We invited him to this talk. He's been in the industry for over 30 years. He owns Thread Climbing. He's one of the early developers of sort of the USAC route setting program. He does a whole bunch of things. One of them, namely, is training Brooke Rabbit too. So I don't know. We thought, why not bring him in? He's got a lot of experience. He's been around for a while.
It's like the most understated introduction.
You got to be really cool when you're introducing a legend. I'll be perfectly honest.
Okay. Well, thank you for that. And no, it's a pleasure to be here. And I recognize some of the names and faces, some of old, some newer, a couple of folks I don't think I know, but yeah, just happy to be with you guys and have a good talk, hopefully together. Can you hear me all right? The sound level okay? Great.
Yeah, no, it's perfect. So for those of you who've been here before, you know that I usually start kind of like at the top by saying that we try as best we can to keep these conversations solution oriented. We all know that when we get in a room of route setters, we can kind of like doom spiral pretty quickly and just turn to like complaining about the problems in the industry. And this is one of those topics that I think does lend itself to that. So we start off the top just by naming the problems. We know what they are. We don't need to ruminate on them because we've all been in this industry for a minute. And if we want to like sit down and complain about it the next time I'm in your town, we can have a beer about it and just, go to town. But for right now, we're just going to name the problems, and then we're going to start talking about the ways that we can address these both like in the industry and for ourselves individually. So we're talking about career progression as route setters, and we all know that some of the things that kind of like make this challenging is there's a clock on every single one of us for how long we can set either full-time or at all. Gyms don't always prioritize setter well-being and longevity, and professional development within route setting doesn't always along with long-term career progression. On top of that, there's always going to be limitations on how many high-level and management roles exist, as well as salary limitations. We're just working in the climbing industry where there isn't always a ton of money. Geographic constraints as well can limit career progression. Are you willing to move for a new role? So knowing that those are some of the problems that we're looking to address, we're going to try to talk about how we can make it better.
Yeah, so we kind of start off by thinking about a few questions that we are going to try to either at least, maybe we aren't going to answer, right? But we can at least talk through. So
yeah, if these were easy to answer, we wouldn't even need to be here. So like we want to provide a space to like talk about these things, and we would love for everybody to walk away with like here's how we'll fix it, but also we wouldn't need to do this if we could do that.
Yeah. So things I would love to kind of dive into is like what does a successful route setting career look like? And I think even several years ago, there probably wasn't even that terminology, right? Like that idea of professional route setting career. How can setters set themselves up for long-term success in the industry? And that can go a bunch of different directions. What options are there, that might be what I would consider like setting adjacent, as like an off-ramp or a subtle off-ramp if we do want to pivot. And is that outside of the climbing industry? What other skills and hobbies can like intersect? So not sure where we really want to start, but Chris, you want to dive in, see where it takes us?
Yeah, and please, both to you guys, we talked about this a little bit in prep a couple weeks ago, just to dialogue through what we might discuss. So I welcome you jumping back, hit me back with questions. But for everyone in the call, I I haven't done one of these, but I've talked about route setting a lot for a long time, and I just feel like it's all more productive when everybody's engaging. I To the point you kind of said about like we didn't used to think of it as a career at all. I'm gonna like try to go real fast through, and maybe some people know me, maybe not, you don't. Doesn't really matter. I've been doing this 30 years, give or take, and I, I I could go through a whole song and dance of like what it used to be like, what it was like 10 years ago versus 20 versus 30, and I'm not going to bore you with that. Like everyone knows generally that it's progressed in terms of like a job as the industry has. But I think the main thing is like thinking of it as a career maybe didn't start until 10 years ago. Um, at least for most people doing it, unless most people thinking to get into route setting. But I pose the question like, what is a career? And I feel like that's maybe as good a place as any to start is I feel like I've talked to a lot of setters over the years, and even now I think culturally, maybe it's just in the States, I don't know, but there's still an attachment to this idea that you choose something you're going to do, and if you're passionate about it, especially like climbing or setting, that it's like what you're going to do, and career then maybe doesn't have an end or doesn't have a limit. Maybe in some other industries, I don't know why I think of just the past 10 years, younger people, maybe tech life or kind of higher level professional, what we would have called white collar jobs a while back, that you just move, do something five or 10 years and then do it again, do something else 5 or 10 years. I don't hear that very often talked about in the gym world or in route setting world. And I think that's an interesting thing for a lot of sitters to think about is there such a thing as a route setting career? And then other careers after that. It doesn't mean it couldn't happen the reverse, that you do, and that does happen where people do something for a while, have multiple careers or education, and then start route setting, maybe in their 30s and make it a career then, but much more likely that you'll do it as, a thing for a time, but then potentially have some other thing you call a career. And I don't see that many people talking about that. And I feel like it's just an interesting point, I guess, or question.
Yeah, I guess I'm curious to open it up a little bit to the room to see kind of what everybody's background and then hopes for the future are. I mean, I can kind of start. I was a classical musician before I got into route setting, and then somebody was like, "Hey, you should do this for a job." And I had never even considered that it could be a job.
My fault.
Pretty much, right? And so like kind of envisioning what that career path would look like and knowing that I did have a clock on how long I would physically be able to do it and trying to like set up for future things kind of was always on my mind a little bit. Um, what about the rest of the people here? I would love to hear what your hopes will be for your route setting careers. You'll have to unmute though.
Okay, I can start first. Like I was a climber like 26, 7 years ago, and I started climbing in a country that women didn't have a setter, like all the time men set for women, and always I find them so many problems like cover move, reachy move, and that thing. And I started like setting there, and yeah, I on that time I thought I need setters that understand short people or like different body. And but after that I stopped setting because I find it really physical and I wanted to most compete instead of setting. And after 20 years, I started setting again because it's the fun, very fun, like when I cannot like climb at the competitors, I find setting is the best way for me to stay in competition or stay in the gym and set. Yeah.
Yeah, it's a really interesting trajectory for sure.
Anyone else?
Yeah, anyone newer to setting, or even if you've set for a time, what did you think your career progression or path was going to be?
Yeah.
I was
Sorry, go
go
ahead.
go ahead.
No, that's okay. You go first. Okay, fine. I'll go. Um, yeah, I've been setting for less than a year now, actually, so I'm pretty new to it. I have been climbing for around 6 years now, but setting definitely really new. And I kind of fell in love with it. I love the creativity of it. I love being able to like share my climbs with other people. And eventually, what I would really hope to try and get into is more competition route setting. Um, I feel like that is kind of hard to break into. I mean, I know I'm very new to it, but it seems like maybe there's not as many positions to be able to do it and things like that. So but that's something I'm definitely looking towards, and hopefully that could be my progression getting to that point. Yeah.
Olivia, I think it was also going to jump in.
Yeah, it was just previously in my past career, I was in nursing, and whenever COVID happened, it was uh, I definitely experienced a lot of burnout, and a lot of bad things were happening in the hospital at the time. And I started route setting just as a part-time thing so that I could like have something joyful in my life for just a minute during all this really difficult time. But then eventually I was just way too burnt out, and route setting just had like a nice open door for me when with a newer position, a higher paying position. And I've been doing it ever since for about 6, 7 years. And I want to keep going. I want to keep going for a long time.
Yeah.
Full time then, I assume. And I'm curious, just how long did you? It sounded like you started doing it part time, maybe while still nursing, or but then transitioned to full time.
Yeah, correct. I was part-time for the first 2 years, and then since then I've been full-time.
Yeah, I think a number of us in this room probably like route setting is really hard work, but at least for me, and it sounds like for you, Olivia, there's something about it that just fits my brain really well. And when I started doing it, I was like, well, this just makes me happy and fulfilled in a way that jobs haven't so far. And I worked like in a lot of different, like little fields. Like I went to a lot of school for classical music and did that, but yeah, route setting just fit my brain. I guess show of hands or something about like other people in the room who feel the same way of like this is the career that like really spoke to me. Yeah, we've got a number of hands up. So then if this
I'm going to
is
raise.
yeah
Sorry to interrupt, Fox, but I'm going to raise my hand though and say, yes, but also totally no. Like I absolutely feel the passion and creativity and attachment to route setting, and have for 30 years. It's definitely why I do what I do today, kind of everything I've done. But I've actually only commercial, it's a good almost disclaimer. I only commercially set 25 years ago for like a year in the Boulder Rock Club around the corner from here, and then in a gym called Metro Rock, Sport Rock for a minute. But I never looked at it, I think, as a career. And maybe it could be thought that that was at the time because it wasn't. Oh, you can't do this as a long term thing. That wasn't really the case. I just kind of felt. I guess what I wanted to jump in to just say is that you can definitely have all of that passion and appreciation of the craft, and whether it's commercial, comp, whatever. I feel like I have it more than any, as much as anyone I've ever met, but I also haven't really done it as a job. So I just think that's interesting to, I don't know, to state and to make clear that there are other ways to be involved in route setting, maybe that where it's not necessarily just a career sort of minded job.
Well, I think it's interesting that you share that, Chris, because I think there's definitely a lot of people in the in route setting who, like myself, who are, full-time I don't know, director or head route setter, or whatever, maybe just route setter. Maybe they're coaching and they supplement their hours, and that's their thing. Maybe they're just part-time. Then there's another crop of people who are working professionals in a different industry, and this is like their fun side money job, or their passion project, that they like don't care about the income and they just love the craft, and they're willing to do it for a week, like once a week, or twice, whatever that schedule works out. And then there's like a third pot of people, I feel like, that maybe kind of are more of like the competition consultant kind of freelancer style route setter, where regardless of what they do as like a quote unquote day job, they're just like hustling to set events all over the country or outside of the country even. So I think it could be interesting to like look at each one of those sort of three pods as we're sort of like looking at all the other stuff we wanted to talk about today.
Do you mind if can you guys hear me?
Yeah, go for it.
Oh yeah. So I've been route setting for a few years on and off, and that's kind of due to being in college. But like I found route setting to be like something that I really enjoy more than, my like idea of what I'd do after college with that degree. And I also like the climbing industry in general, and kind of want to take route setting and end up maybe having a career in route setting and then moving into like managing gyms or something like that. And yeah, so I guess that's like, I don't know if that's like a different category, but that's kind of what I'm thinking about.
I'm gonna reply and just say that's a great category. Like all I mean by
Thanks.
that is I I think that it's awesome to be thinking, whether you've been setting for a year or maybe a year to 5 years, to be thinking of what else appeals to you, other than just, let's call it turning the wrench or using the drill or making boulders or making routes, whether it's commercial or comp. And if it's in the industry, like sounds like it may be for you, Nathan, that's awesome to identify that. That's one of the things that I would say is a main point I talk to a lot of setters about, is just stressing that, like thinking about that before you've maybe already done it for 10 or 15 or 20 years. It's for most setters, whether it's peers or a lot of younger folks, 10 or 20 years younger than me as well. I feel like I've had a lot of conversations with people who maybe didn't think, do I want to be a like gym manager? Do I want to just be a route setting director? Do I want to own a gym? Do I want to work in climbing, but maybe not always full-time setting? I don't know. For everyone, the answers may be different, but I just think that's probably the most important question, is to be asking that and be looking ahead with it. And in that sense, even the title of this thing, I think, was Route Setting Career Progression ? Because it's definitely not any fixed path,
Right.
So
And there's also like the timeline, or like the time limit to how much your body can take. And, I think might be hard to, 'cause it's as fun as it is to work set full time, like doing it. I mean, you probably know, but doing it for like years and years is probably pretty taxing.
I'm not tired at all. I don't know what you're talking
Oh.
about. It's so great.
False. Yeah, we just did regionals last week. We are tired.
Yeah.
Yeah, well, and so I can speak a little bit to my experience, because I have a degree in speech and language pathology and was going to go in that realm, and then I started route setting and I was like, oh wait, this is way more fun.
Yeah.
went through the motions of, like learning how to route set, being a route setter, hybrid coach, whatever roles, then took on my first leadership position as a head route setter, and then moved around a bunch of gyms, like leadership here, leadership there. And now I run, I'm like in charge of the head route setters for a couple of gyms in Seattle. And I would say that at each one of those sort of like steps, the amount of route setting I was doing on a weekly basis was reduced, right? So, I remember early on in my career, I mean, and granted, this was 15 years ago or something, it was like I was setting 5 days a week, and I would not recommend that to anyone. And then, fast forward to now, it's like maybe once or twice a week. And so I think that there's like some built-in sustainabilities as people move towards this sort of like management, if that's the career trajectory that you're looking for and have.
I like that. Yeah, that sounds cool.
Yeah, my guess is, Justin, in your case, you might have had some forethought projection of, whether it was the management level, being head route setter, especially in your timeline, I think. But to a degree, it probably also happened organically, right? Like you wanted to set, you were setting at this place, that place. Maybe you want to take on a leadership role, become a head route setter. I guess, yeah. Did it happen? Was it planned in your mind, or was it more organic that you kind of just an opportunity arose, and how much of it was identifying that you didn't want to be setting as much versus that you wanted to be managing, or moving to different places and have different sort of career experiences?
Yeah, that's such an interesting question. I feel like for me, there was not much like let's look forward. I'm not a big like 5-year planner. I was like, this is sick, and then an opportunity presented itself, and I was like, oh, cool, okay, more responsibility or more money or more whatever. And then I feel like at least a lot of people I've talked to have shared similar mentalities where they're like, okay, what's next? Okay, what's next? Right. And I think if you kind of put blinders on and you just look at route setting commercially, for you to think about, oh, now I want to have a wife and a house or a kid or a car, that I want to move to a place where I don't just have to like camp. It's like, okay, well, I need to make enough money to do that. And then you're looking at, how do I do that? Can I do that on a part-time salary of or as a part-time route setter? Can I do that as a full-time route setter? Do I need to move into management to like break through that threshold to be able to provide? And so I think like that's sort of where I was starting to look, where I was like, okay, well, have I hit a ceiling, and where's the next one? And then how do I need to, what pivots, whether it be moving across the country to an opportunity, or whether it's like, hey, we're opening a new gym and maybe you'd be the right fit for it, but it's like sliding here and there. And I can tell you, like, I started in New England and now I'm in Seattle, and it's quite difficult, for at least in my position, to find alternative high-level route setting positions that are going to pay what I feel like I need to not have like a to afford this house that I'm living in. It's like Seattle's expensive. But yeah, it's like,
Yeah.
whereas my wife, she works in a completely different industry, and if she wants to work somewhere else, she's just like, well, there's thousands of jobs literally everywhere. So it's definitely challenging.
I think that's a really interesting thing that I encourage a lot of people to think about, where if we think about route setting career progression, we've got the comp progression, which is laid out somewhat, difficult to break into and a bit inconsistent. You've got the commercial progression of, all right, apprentice to route setter to head route setter to director. And that's kind of the end. And there are more director jobs than there used to be, but there aren't a ton. But there's also like a lot of different kind of little side hustles, or like different avenues that you can move into, where, I mean, I started volunteering for the CWA committees and ended up finding work through my involvement with that. So figuring out kind of what your interests are, where I very early on in route setting was like, okay, how can I make this better? I love this thing. How can I make it more better. And there are so many groups of people that are working to do that, where like I hate to advocate for like doing free work, but like if you decide to like volunteer for an organization, like you know what you're getting into. For me, that like industry progression was passion that I was excited about. And I met people who shared that passion and was able to find like different career avenues through that. And so figuring out like what is it about the thing you are doing in route setting that drives you forward? And how can you be more involved in that little path to create different inroads? Because like maybe you have that like very straight commercial track of route setter, head route setter, director, but maybe you branch off and you're like really psyched about holds and you learn how to shape holds. Like, what is it that makes you psyched? And how can you do it? So I guess humans in the room, what are you psyched about?
Something that I kind of thought about after Zachary mentioned breaking into the comp setting scene is that I think I do know some people that are like kind of in a management and managing gyms, but also were former like route setters that can set for comps while having a different kind of job or like within the gym industry. And so that's something I considered too.
If I can comment on the comp sort of theme for a minute, and I welcome questions or other people's experiences, ideas. Definitely that's true. I mean, I have peers and not many older than me, but a few that are 10 years or less younger than me, who are what you're describing, Nathan, who are like not, they might still route set, but they would not consider what they do, or their titles do not associate with being just route setters today. And I could probably, I mean, yeah, pretty easily like get through both hands and then beyond to another hand or two about people who own gyms who are in that realm. And if they don't own them, certainly another dozen or two pretty quickly that are are in some kind of director situation or management overall of multiple gym businesses. There's folks like that, but still we're talking in the dozens, and today there may be a dozen people on the call, but there's thousands of setters out there, right? And I feel like the back to the comp thing, I suppose, sorry to tangent. One thing I want to say, because I feel like it's just worth noting, whether for people on the call or anybody that might listen later, I think the comp like desire to set and aspire to competitions is awesome. Having the ambition to do that is awesome, but I actually think it's oftentimes like a trap. It's so far to think of like what it would be to set, if you haven't set for comps at all, to set for comps. If you have set for comps, but you don't have any like USA climbing levels or certifications, or haven't set for a regional or divisional, or to aspire nowadays to set the Olympics, for example, it's really open-ended. And like, you can look really far ahead and think, I can progress through that. At the same time, I think the real question is, what are you going to be doing in the meantime while you're trying to do that? Because that's not what's going to pay you to do anything. Even, I mean, the last competition that I set, that was like a sanctioned comp, was World Championship in Moscow 4 years ago, or 4 years ago, 5 years ago, 5 years ago. And I did that for 10 years, once or twice a year. That's all. So if I was doing it as a way to make money, it was a lost cause from the beginning. It was not like, that doesn't mean there aren't some people that nowadays, maybe I could count on one hand, people I know that make their livings only from competition setting, probably not even. But I think that it's so fun and cool to set for comps is a very different experience than to set commercially day to day. And I encourage people to want to do it and to do it. But I think there is a potential trap in thinking, how do I progress to that? Oh, I just need to keep setting. I need to be a commercial setter to be able to be on that track, that comp track. And whether or not that's the case is a question in itself. But even if the answer were yes, I'd still kind of throw back to a lot of folks like, how badly do you want to just aspire in the comp world? And is there any cost there in just looking at what you're doing day to day? Because comp setting is amazing, but it doesn't hey, it doesn't pay the bills, and it doesn't necessarily correlate to any other practical, I think, skills that you can apply even to your day-to-day route setting commercial job. I mean, some, yes, but and certainly not other realms. So I just think it's weird maybe for some people that may know of me or my background, weird thing to say, being a fairly accomplished competition setter. But I thought of it as a thing setting in general, especially because I didn't set that commercially for very long, as just a thing I couldn't help but do. I needed to do it in some way, but it didn't have to be what I was doing as a job. And even the idea of progressing from like setting a regional to setting before there was divisionals, nationals, or to becoming an IFSC setter. Those were things that I wanted to do, but I think less because they were a step or an idea of like getting to a certain point than just because that was the new challenge. That was like the fun next challenge to do that was part of the passion that I had. And I'm not, a lot of other people have that same approach, but I would just encourage, especially younger route setters, to put the comp world in context is all I guess I would say.
I like that you said that, because I think that I feel the same way, as it would be something I do just for the love of route setting and like learning, and the experience of setting for competitions. And less
Yeah,
of like less of like a career in
I'd
competition
welcome
setting.
anybody, sorry to interrupt, anyone else have thoughts, questions, sort of feelings on the comp or how it correlates with the commercial stuff. I'll just say that, Nathan, I think that's a great way of looking at it. I mean, the last sanctioned comp I set was an IFSC comp many years ago now, but the last comp I set was at my kind of warehouse wall here behind me, and it was just as fun. Yeah, maybe not as high pressure, but just as challenging. And I learned, I would say, just as much as the last like World Cups or World Championships that I set. And I
That's
didn't
really
get
cool.
anything out of it. It was just doing it for fun with my friends. We do
Right.
a comp every year. But I can't count the number of times I've had those kind of conversations with setters to talk about your local comp that's not sanctioned at all, like organizing one or doing something, getting your gym to do something for the community. That those comp setting is different than commercial setting, and it's really fun. It does teach you different things, and it's it's a great way to passionately engage in the craft. But it does not have to be at a certain level, because at the end of the day, at least from my experience, it doesn't change that much from one level to the next in terms of the actual work. It's higher pressure. Yes, there's all sort of ambition or what you're trying to do. And it's amazing to work with like higher level athletes or work in a situation where you're crafting things for them. But it's not really different from what you do if you're setting regionals this past weekend, I guess, or a local or your home wall comp. It's all the same basic stuff. Somebody disagrees? Somebody, anyone, any comments on that? Any sort of commercial questions, thoughts?
I mean, I think some of what you bring up can kind of like pivot us to this concept of we set out for ourselves often early in our careers, but I mean, I think it's a very natural human thing to do of like, this is the thing that I want to do. This is how I'm going to earn my living, and it's going to be great. And so like, I think competition setting is a really good example, but also like being a head setter or director of setting can be an equally good example of like, okay, once I make it to here, it's going to be awesome. And that's going to be my career. And being able to be flexible and pivot and know that there's up and downsides of any given career path is a really important skill for all of us to kind of have as we move through different paths. And you might find a head setting position, which is the perfect fit, and it's what you want to do for the next 40 years. It might be a perfect fit for 10 years. But being able to be adaptable and know that like that thing that you have as the goal for yourself may or may not be what you want to be doing in 5, 10, 15, 20 years. So always staying focused on what your values are and why you do the thing that you do. If you love route setting, why is that? And how can you keep that love? Or have you kept that love? Like, I think this is something I've thought about a lot in life. I think something in our culture is, if you love something, it should be the only thing that you do. And if you deviate in any way from like putting all of your attention and all of your focus towards that thing, that means you love it less. And I think we touched on it a little bit at the beginning of this conversation, that like maybe you do a little bit of route setting and you also do something else. I don't think that in any way that diminishes your love of route setting per se. It might just be what fits your life the best. And so figuring out how to pursue the thing that is meaningful to you, because ultimately that's what gives meaning to the people that you're serving in your community by route setting.
Yeah, the thing I think about is like having an open-mindedness, I guess, in general, right? Because like I, at least speaking for myself and my career trajectory as it's been over the last 20 years or so, I didn't necessarily think that I would be in a multi-gym sort of director role. Maybe I aspired to, and I was trying to make decisions that would help me get there. But there were also a bunch of little, like, I will call them side quests along the way. You know, whether that be getting USAC levels and trying to go through the comp circuit, or maybe, I mean, helping found Vortex and going into this like consulting space that kind of put us in this call, was like not a plan. It was just a thing that happened in a conversation that sort of was a route setting adjacent activity that ended up just turning into an LLC of its own, and a whole bunch of different avenues portaled through there, similar to sort of your experience with like, I mean, we're both volunteering on the CWA, but you've sort of like moved into a CWA sort of advisory role. And some of these things are predictable and some of them aren't, but either way, like,
Dude, I was a professional violist. I would have never predicted any of this. Like, but it all comes back to like the thing that you're passionate about, which keeps you in the industry. Like, we're all here because we love rock climbing and route setting. Like, I don't think any of us would do route setting if we didn't love it. It's really hard.
the passion
The
tax.
passion.
Yeah, I'm kind of curious. I'm just like looking through some of our notes, and one of the things that we have on here is just this idea of part-time versus full-time. And so I'd love to, maybe it's a little bit of a pivot, but I'm kind of curious, just like, Chris, your opinion, and maybe anyone else's in the room's opinion. We talked about like, you know, different steps, at least from commercial and comp setting. You know, I want to kind of zoom in on maybe the commercial side of things. We have these opportunities both to maybe be a full-time employee or a part-time employee. I'm curious, just like, if we could explore a little bit, just like the pros and cons of these different models, big gym versus small gym, full-time versus part-time, you know, multi-departmental versus like sole route setting department. Because I know my opinion has shifted over the years, and I'm curious just what other people think.
Anyone in the room with some route setting background experience who make sort of comment on that, the pros and cons of full-time sort of longer term path versus potential part-time or other roles, whether you're on the route setting side or like hiring route setters or
Isaac?
I'm
Oh.
happy to chime in now that I am in a place where I actually can speak. Sorry I missed my opportunity to talk about my progression earlier, because I think it's a little bit interesting as well. But I think I'm not the only person here who has diverged from just being a route setter into what is, I think, the most adjacent, which is coaching. I see 3 or 4, or if I scroll through, maybe more names or faces here that have dabbled in both. Also, I think they inform one another, and I think it can be cyclical, where I've spent time as a primarily route setter who coaches a little bit, and then primarily a coach who sets a little bit. I think they complement each other really well. Chris maybe can speak to that a little bit with somebody at the Olympic level that he coaches. But also, I can speak to this a little bit with some more recent experience as somebody who leans in heavily in one of those arenas only. You might find yourself in a position where things change, where you're in a managerial role, for instance, and you think you've got security, and then that changes. Recently, I won't say where I was working, but I was laid off several months ago from a head route setter position, and that changed, my career trajectory. It felt like dramatically. But with my experience, I was able to lean on that a little bit and also reach out to my network and find other part-time setting work to dabble in more of this freelancing that we have talked about, traveling and doing an opening set or a competition. And then, more recently, I've landed again at another local gym chain, but I don't have to rely on working there full-time or in management. Currently, I'm setting 3 days a week instead of the 4 or 5 that I have in the past, and that feels a little more sustainable, except for the weeks that I choose to take a gig, traveling or working elsewhere. I work for a wall builder that sends me all over the country to set in, different scenarios, corporate offices, or I was at a Boys and Girls Club last weekend. Different things like that, where you can pick up extra part-time work and you don't have to be beholden to the 9 to 5 full-time grind for one company. And I find that has given me the freedom to kind of pick and choose what I want to do and travel and do more climbing when I want to do that. And actually, honestly, being laid off and having like the full-time managerial position taken away from me has been one of the biggest blessings in my route setting career of the last 15 plus years.
Thanks for sharing that. Yeah, and good to see you, Isaac. I feel like just comment on that, and then if others jump in, there's a lot there, and I just think that the things that jump out at me that I've had many conversations with setters about over the past 10 or 20 years are what other skill sets can you learn even while route setting? Again, many times, like, you can be a setter and become an assistant manager. You can be a setter and also be part-time coaching, as in a full-time situation in a gym. Or you can be a part-time setter and also do other things, whether they're climbing or not. I think a little bit of the trick of the industry, the place the industry is in that's challenging is 10, not much more, but 10, maybe 15 years ago, I personally think a lot of gyms started recognizing, it's not that they didn't recognize the value of route setting to begin with, it's the product of the climbing experience in a gym, but they reacted with the growth to, paying route setters better, trying to find more full-time setters, and focusing on, I think, retainment of setters and promotion possibilities of setters in a way that it hadn't happened in the 2000s anyway, or prior to that. And that means nowadays there's many more jobs, just tons of jobs probably today on CBJ, Scott, where you can just be a full-time route setter and you can take that job, because now there's so many more gyms that have that one role and it's full-time. And even nowadays it's full-time and you only maybe have to do it 3 or 4 days a week. And you have an admin day or you do other stuff. At the same time, there's still a ceiling to that. And the ceiling's not that much different than it has been for the past 30 years. And my own feeling is I'm not sure that I don't want to be too negative about it, but I just say it straight. I don't know that there's as many practical sort of transferable skills to other worlds, whether climbing related or totally out of climbing, from just route setting for 5, 10, 15, 20 years, than if you're also fulfilling some other roles. Again, if it's in a gym, maybe you're coaching, maybe you're a manager, maybe you're you either have education or you just are passionate about other aspects of a craft that can relate to a gym environment, like marketing or back end work, maybe operations, just sort of management, programming, if it's not coaching, youth oriented or program oriented things. And back to one of the things I said earlier, I think just trying to identify those other things that you may either have some passion about as well, and or just identify may have other practical skill sets you can learn and take into your own experience. And Isaac, it sounds like in your case, now that's happened over time, but even now, working with gym builder, working with a wall builder, coaching, whether it's like as a job or freelance or both, going and having to do a contract where you go and get contracted by someone to comp set, all those have skill sets you have to learn, or things you learn from at least, that are just different than if you're in the gym every day doing the same work. And I think the same extends, I don't want to put this on you, Isaac, but like the experience of someone who was a setter and then a head setter, director, managing people. I think the experience is not that different for the setter who just sets for 10 years versus, at least for many head setters or directors of setting, who also ultimately say, is this what I want to do into my 50s or 60s? And maybe it is. But I often talk about that as like the 1 in 1,000 person. And that's not, I know some of those few people and they're amazing. And I feel like they're such climbers at the core that they couldn't think to do anything else. They don't need to do anything else to be fulfilled. Just doing the craft, whether it's every day in the gym, 5 days a week, or 2 or 3 days a week, also managing other setters, that they'll be really fulfilled no matter what by doing that. But I think that's kind of the 1 in 1,000. So anyway, yeah, I'm, if anyone else has comments or thoughts on that, or back to you, Justin and Foxman.
I love it.
I mean, I guess I kind of want to open up to the room. We've got about 10 minutes before the end of the hour. And just seeing, like, do y'all have questions? Do y'all have feelings? What are your experiences in this? Because it's a huge topic. Yeah, Nathan.
Something I want to get you guys' opinion on is, so I grew up in the climbing gym, and since I was 16, I've been trying like different positions. Like I started at setting support for a while, and I did some maintenance and a little bit of coaching, and now I'm gonna try some front desk work this summer. And I think my idea, or like my plan, is just to like do a lot of things so I get a feel for how like gyms kind of operate. And through doing that, I started, well, route setting was kind of like my goal from when I was younger, and that's something I always kind of aspired to do. And now that I do it, I love it. But also, like, I want to have a broad skill set, like you say, like have a lot of things that I can do and be flexible.
Yeah, well worth doing. Well worth just trying to get the experience. And I think whether it's back in my day or today, route setters often, I don't want to stereotype everyone, but think of what we do as the cool thing. Everybody, what everybody else is doing, whatever, they're working the desk, or they're, that's cool. Coaching is fun and cool too, but like, you wouldn't be able to coach unless I put the holes on the wall for you to go climb on, right? So it's like we're thinking of the craft that we do as so special, and it is the fundamental product of a gym or a competition experience. All that's true. I love the creation of it for sure, but there's so many other things that are interesting, challenging, good to learn. And actually, I never would have thought this way myself when I was in my teens or 20s, but definitely now can look back and think like, it's not bad to have transferable skills that you can do something else with, whether that's customer service just at a front desk, whether it's in the gym or also doing other things like other education. For sure, I kind of advocate for people pursuing college and working in other fields, and still maybe route setting, whatever it is. There's just a lot of other ways to learn and challenge yourself, and route setting can also still be one of them. But the main thing is, how long do you want it to be one of them? And maybe asking the question earlier on for many people, what does your career progression look like? And is there another career that happens simultaneous after? Yeah. Anyone else? Please.
I was just going to say, Nathan, what you're looking to do, if you are a very well-rounded gym employee and you understand all of the different departments, that makes you potentially more valuable to step into like any individual role as needed. And so it just opens up a lot more possibilities within the climbing gym industry in the future.
Yeah, my
I gotta
dad
say it
always
too.
says to be a lifelong learner.
I
Sorry.
I have multiple friends here in Boulder who have been route setters, but were either pursuing their collegiate education or master's degree, or like did route setting and then went to that later. And most of them, because they have like full-time enough jobs, but a few of these people we're talking about, I'm sure they make six figures. They're on a career progression in their 20s or 30s that'll be like they can have families, they can travel, they can like live their lives climbing if they want to because of this maybe career choice they've made. But still, like if they want to go set a comp or two, they definitely could. They're really experienced, really knowledgeable. If they want to go just climb a lot more than most commercial route setters climb, they can. And they did have route setting experience. It's just that they weren't always maybe looking at that as the end goal, yeah. Other comments or questions?
I have a question.
Go for it.
So I'm from Canada, and I think we're like maybe 10 years behind the US in terms of the climbing industry and where it's at. And we have a lot of part-time setters, and I think that's a pretty common thing in pretty much any gym, but it's not really considered a full-time job for the most part. And we have a lot of small gyms too, so there's like setting once a week or so. Um, I feel like a lot of people and a lot of setters that I've talked to feel like the gyms and the owners, they prioritize those part-time setters because they're cheaper. And I guess that kind of makes less space, less jobs for those that want to take it more seriously. Do you guys have any opinions on that? And kind of do those part-time setters take away from the full-time setting jobs out there? Like, what do you guys think about that?
I think,
I love this
Yeah.
question. This is one of the things I was sort of trying to poke at when I initially brought up this full-time part-team thing. So I appreciate you kind of bringing it back. When I prior in my career, I was in this mindset that I was like, I need to only hire full-time route setters who are going to be career oriented, and I want them to be like passionate about climbing. I want them to be like super experienced. And in my experience, I've found that it takes a very long time to get to that point. And then what happens? Like then they leave, and then you have to start over, right? And so I'm thinking like, okay, well, especially if you have this like multifunctional, like, oh, in order for me to get you to full time, you have to also coach, and that puts restrictions on your working hours, or it makes it harder for you to be flexible. Whereas someone who is in a part-time role, I think, can jump in. They're like, oh yeah, I can add an extra day today or this week or something like that. So I think there's lots of pros and cons, and I would love to I'm curious what you and Chris think about this.
yeah, my view on it has shifted. Where I was a full-time route setter for like 10 years, and now I am a part-time like physical route setter, and then spend a lot of time writing or consulting and doing like other like route setting climbing industry things, but not physically putting holds on the wall. And so usually when I get brought into a gym, it's for a comp or in some sort of like mentor capacity, or just like extra experienced hands that can help, where a lot of times I think gyms are starting to view part-time route setters as less experienced, or like the big commercial gyms have that be like an apprentice role as you're a part-time setter, and then you like graduate to be a full-time setter. But I know a number of very, very experienced people who have moved away from full-time route setting because they're just not looking to do that with their bodies anymore. And they've got different priorities in life, but they still are very passionate about sharing their experience. And so being able to capitalize on people's experience who are no longer necessarily interested in the grind of commercial route setting, I think can bring a lot of value to a team. And maybe I'm just super biased because that's kind of what I'm doing now. But also, I don't know, in the last 5 years, I think my view on that has shifted as I've had the opportunity to work with incredibly experienced people who are like, nope, I don't want to work more than 2 days a week.
I think so. In my opinion, I think because I am aligned with your thought process as well. I think the trick is you have to get the experience first, right? And so how does one, if they're only working 1 day a week, gain that experience? It, you know, that's going to extrapolate over a long time. So maybe it is the case that, you know, early on you are more engaged in the process, maybe 3 days a week, maybe it's full time, whatever.
I mean, early on, I wanted to be setting 5 days
Yeah.
a week. I'm like, I can't get enough of this.
Well, because you want to learn and you don't want it to take 10 years. You want it to take 5 or 3 or 1 or whatever. But then, you know, I think this comes with age too. You're like, ouch, I'm tired. I'm not projecting. I can't send anything anymore. And you're like, maybe I should only do this once or twice a week. And then I think that there's almost this like natural kind of off ramp that puts a lot of formerly full-time route setters into this, like, hey, maybe part-time is the better play. And I think knowing that they exist, there's a very big difference between like, hey, we're hiring a part-time apprentice versus, hey, we're hiring a part-time experienced route setter.
Which kind of speaks to Jack's
Yeah.
point of like, those part-time people are maybe being prioritized because they're cheaper. Where
Yeah, I think there's 2 points, or you can kind of separate out the question, maybe, Jackie, in 2 ways. On the one hand, I could say, I guess I could pose the question back, propose to everyone. Maybe Canada's 10 years ahead, not 10 years behind. And you know, I wouldn't necessarily you could take that to the extreme, but I do think the situation, Justin, you described of like you're trying to hire you're trying to hire route setters all the time. You've found the experience being a director of route setting now, or a head route setter, others in the room who the same. I'm sure there are many people who have found the experience of constantly trying to find route setters who are skilled enough, let's call it, reliable, that you think you can retain for 3, 5x years, and then maybe you get them, but then they're going to move on. Not all of them, but many of them. And so you as a director, you're sort of always in this challenge. The gym's owner is also always in that challenge. So I definitely think there's a lot of, I would encourage, and I have encouraged, I don't envy the gym owner's position either, of trying to figure out how to navigate thinking of maybe more part-time type roles in route setting. But I think that's a direction, especially many small, medium, but even many bigger gyms may want to consider going. Now, that's separate from if the reason for doing that is just not wanting to afford quality, whatever's perceived as quality route setting, or just, you know, paying for what's cheaper, then I could go back to, oh, that's going way back in the day when we were all just volunteers and we're sort of doing it just because we love it, and then kind of risk like, wait, I'm doing this all the time, but not getting paid well. And the gyms, I don't think honestly many gyms meant to take advantage of that, you know, over the past sort of history of this industry. There may be some, but I think it's more the case of just like gym owners are just trying to figure it out too. So I just think it may be that we're like, it's realistic to look at part-time as a possible avenue for things too. And in that sense, what you're experiencing in Canada, again, maybe it's a little bit ahead, and we just don't know it yet. I could be wrong there, obviously, but it's just a thought.
Any other questions or thoughts?
I had 2 questions for the panel and everyone in the room. One of them being, what is one thing that y'all think is currently missing in the current route setting industry and that you think can be developed in the future? As well as, I've been curious about how route setters can convey the value that they bring to a climbing gym or a competition, and how to advocate for pay and compensation in relation to that.
guys, I'm
I'll
so-
answer. Go ahead, Fox. I was just going to answer the
Everyone's chiming
first.
in on that
I thought
one.
you were going to answer the second.
Go for it, Chris.
no, go for it.
Well, it's just going to be a practical, and I mean, I'll speak to Foxman what you had framed early in the conversation, I think, about trying to be outcome oriented. So to your first question, Matthew, I think gyms could work, you know, in cooperation with setters that they're trying to hire or hiring or currently employ in ways to navigate how a different future may look. And what I mean by that is the same way that I would recommend a lot of setters, mostly earlier in your careers, you know, or the people's careers, start to think about why am I doing this? What is this career? How long may it last? What else may I want to do? I think gyms trying to pursue new patterns of hiring, new ways of thinking, maybe with a little bit less focus on retainment and more focus on the kind of just the reality that there will constantly be this kind of turnover, and trying to find and innovate in terms of employment structures. You know, I've got crazy ideas. I don't think I've yet to see a gym pursue, but I'd love the idea of gyms employing, you know, people while they're in high school or college, at part-time, potentially having like a scholarship type, even if it's really modest, encouraging people who are route setting, who are working for a gym, to actually try to find something else that they really like doing and education oriented. So some ideas there that I feel like are about the gyms as well too. There may be some owners or managers or people who have that knowledge or experience in the room as well. But I think there's a lot to that we haven't really explored yet. And but by no one's fault, really, the gyms have been trying really hard to make their product really great. They've frankly have been paying people better and better and better, and I think we've matured in that way. But now we're confronting this new challenge, I think, of where do we want to be as an industry in 10 years? Do we want to be where we are today? Constant turnover, training people to only find them, realize the ceiling is right there. You've been busy working in the craft and wanting to put the holes on the wall and work 5 days a week, but you maybe a lot of people hadn't looked up and seen that the ceiling is right there. So that's some practical ideas.
Yeah, I think some of my bias, like I said, I'm super biased. I think that the answer to both of your questions, Matt, are professionalization. I think this is where that bias is. Like, I've been working with the Climbing Wall Association to be building commercial certification programs. I think having more educational tracks, so that the only way to like prove that you're a good setter isn't by, you know, grinding for 10 years full time, but if you are able to like show, you know, both through references, which we're already currently using, and various certification programs, some of which are more established than others, that you are a dedicated learner and you're interested in improving, that can be something that I think the industry hasn't had enough opportunities to grow in different ways other than just like that grind every single day. But then as far as demonstrating our value as route setters, behaving in a professional way, you know, whether you're full-time, part-time, new to the craft, or been in it for a while, I think that's a really big piece.
I think another thing that, Fox, what you're saying makes or it comes to mind as I hear what you're saying. There sometimes is a malalignment with what the route setter wants to put on the wall and what the owner or manager wants on the wall. And so I think even just having a conversation, whether you're in a management position or just like maybe encourage your manager to have this conversation, just like, hey, what is the brand of route setting that this facility is trying to accomplish? And if that doesn't align with your particular like setting brand, then like find one that does, right? And I think there's a lot of pain points and friction points with route setters and owners or managers. And I think in some ways it kind of all stems to that. It's like, I want to set these like dope modern or commercial, modern or competition style routes, and maybe that's just not the brand that Gym A is looking to offer to its community, but Gym B is, and it's like, maybe I would be a better fit for Gym B. And so I think it even starts at the conversation level there.
Knowing that that's all fine,
yeah,
too. Like, I think we all as individuals have this idea of like, you know, column A is better or column B is better, but all of it's fine. So you find the place that works for you and that aligns with your values and what you find valuable in the craft. I want to ping on a comment from chat from Olivia, which is a really good question. And I think it's a really big question that maybe we should have a future discussion on, because I don't know that we have either like the knowledge base right now. Like I want to do more research, or
should
the
read the question.
time. So I'm reading the question. I'm sorry. Look, hey, guys. Okay, so the question
I
is
had
how
an
like
answer, if you don't mind, if it's okay. I had an answer that kind of, it was like an answer to Matt's question that also kind of covers Olivia's a little bit.
can we read Olivia's question? Because if somebody watches this on YouTube, they won't
Yes.
know what it is.
How likely do you see the long desired route setting union? Do you feel it is necessary or important? By the way, my name is Matt, and I feel like I was late, even though I tried to time this perfectly. So I apologize if I missed some stuff.
Hi, Matt.
One of the biggest holdups in a career in route setting is, of course, progression and certifications and other things, but it's long-term financial support. And that's not just route setting, that's the gym industry. We're having gyms that have 401ks for their employees, and we have other gyms that are still fundraising for climbing teams. We run the gambit, so you really have to kind of choose who you can work for that might be able to offer some of those long-term benefits. And so then to answer Olivia's question, unionization can provide a lot of things. Speaking as a group, as a voice can help a lot. But if you're unionizing against a single owner gym versus Momentum, Movement, any of the biggers, you're going to have a completely different outcome. So we'd have to really think about what that means to unionize. Is it more unionization on standards so that we're all raising the bar together, or is it really to fight for, collective bargaining?
Matt, that was a really good answer.
Thanks.
Yeah. I think we'll put it on the list of future topics because I think it's a really big and prescient one.
I also think there's a lot going on in the industry at the moment that is currently that.
I would need to prepare, guys, not prepare for that question.
Any other thoughts or questions? I know we're running a little bit long, so I want to keep an eye on the clock.
For the panel, if there was one thing that you would say to your 20-year-old self, or back in like when you first started setting, what would that one thing be?
Lift weights.
Yeah.
I still don't do that actually. I feel like I need to answer that question because I've been route setting in some capacity since 2002. So like, I feel like I have to, what would I say to a younger version of myself, in like on a trajectory of a professional route setter or like looking for a professional route setting career? It'd maybe be like, don't listen to the person that told you you're too old to get into comp setting, because that was said to me once and that person was wrong.
I think the first half of your sentence really summed it up for where I was and where route setting was when I was young. Professional career. Those words didn't exist, route setting, professional career, when I was learning how to set. If you want to be a route setter, think of it that way. Think of it as a career. Think about how you can make the best impact for you and what you want to do.
Yeah, I would jump in and agree, because I think 2015, even 10 years ago, I don't think that many people were thinking about this. I think, this idea of I'm young and invincible and I can pull hard, and not thinking that might change in 5, 10, 15, 20, however many years. So like being proactive. And I think one of the things that I appreciate is that I think that there's a lot more conversation about wellness and sustainability in our our route setting bubble now, largely just because people like Chris, people like Fox and I, a lot of people in this room who have been at it for a while are kind of getting up there and having to figure out like how we're going to like teach the younger generations the better way, if that makes sense.
I would say you have no idea what's coming.
Don't get old.
Well, but also like you just don't know where your career is going to go. And so being open to taking different paths and trying new things because you have no idea what doors are going to open. I mean, when I was 20, I was a professional violist and was not route setting. And then I was route setting. And now I'm like writing technical manuals and guest route setting. And you just never know. So take open doors that are presented to you because you don't know where your life is going to go.
That seems like the best note to end on.
Gosh, that's
We did it.
cool. Well, should we plug next month's doodad? Should we also say, like, if you guys have questions, I believe there are ways to contact any of us. Because it's a big conversation. And I think, I mean, I only want to speak for myself, but I'm probably speaking for everybody when like we do this because we care about being resources. So
Yeah, if I can just jump in, thank you all, Foxman and Justin, for asking me to come on today. And yeah, just to stress, like I've been setting for 30 years. I've talked to setters every day, and I've been in various realms around it. And one of the things I enjoy the most is having conversations. And so I really, really welcome anyone. Some of you, I know some of you I don't know. My email is cdanielson@threadclimbing.com. Any questions anyone ever has, anyone wants to talk about just sort of the industry, their own path, yeah, just reach out, and I'm always happy to engage and talk about it. I think to Matthew's question, and this, back when you were 20, what would you say? I couldn't help but just think, I was trying to really think and listen to everyone's answers. And I think that the V2 that I set on the college wall where I started climbing in 1994, and the experience I had of watching my friends try that is just as good as whatever boulder I set in a World Cup or for a high level athlete, or when I worked in, I don't know, sort of a gym or high level comp environment. That the actual craft of just making the thing and having other people engage with it doesn't change no matter what the level. And I would tell my 20-year-old self to just know that. Beyond that, just work hard. That's all I can say.
Okay, well, we actually have the next month's guest right here. So if anyone's interested, when is it? It's the 10th, June 10th.
this is Stefmer.
Hello.
We're
Also,
never
hi, Chris.
Hi, Steph.
Also, hi, Scott. Also, hi, Will.
We're never all in the same room, so we figured we'd make the best of this moment. So yeah, we're talking about hiring for a diverse team and being awesome.
It's really
So-
important for your team to be made up of a lot of just like different people. Kind of like a forest. If a forest is all just like a monoculture, not much diversity in the forest. I studied a lot of earth science. I mean, just a lot of ecosystems in general are very diverse. It's very, very important. And route setting is absolutely an ecosystem, as we all know.
Yeah, so come talk to us.
Sweet.
Huzzah! I think we did it.
Hey, everybody, thank you so much for joining us. You'll get an email to a little survey probably tomorrow or the day after once the recording is posted. And yeah, check out next month. Thanks so much, Foxman and Justin, for preparing, Chris for being part of this. It was really a pleasure and a privilege to see you and have you here. So y'all have a good night.
Thanks for hosting,
Thanks, Scott.
Scott.
Cheers, everyone.